which is increased capital account flexibility, convertibility, flexibility of the currency. As it's currently constituted, as the current exchange rate regime, it has no role to play as a reserve currency. So it's part of the reform of the system, which could actually help adjustment to imbalances. So it's important, but it's very medium term.
Well, I think its future is very much as Marx suggests. And once again, the time frame is in decades rather than years. I'm sorry there isn't a Chinese representative actually on this panel, because it is so much the core of the debate that we're having. And I heard a very eloquent defense this morning at Davos by David Lee, the Chinese economist, of China's position. We must remember that not everybody takes the view that China has to appreciate its currency immediately. From a Chinese vantage point, that's an extremely high-risk strategy. So thinking in decades, as the Chinese tend to do, I think you can anticipate a time when the RMB is possibly even an equal of the dollar in the international monetary system. But I think we're talking 10, 20, more like 40 years down the line rather than 4 years.
Stanley Fischer, both the Europeans but also the US have tried to put a little bit of pressure on the Chinese. Is this counterproductive?
Well, it's very hard to tell. The theory of don't push us, then we'll do it on our own and stop bothering us is a nice argument to make. Whether it actually would result in anything is very doubtful to my view.
I mean, I think China is going to be forced by economic pressures of its own making to change, because, as we've been saying, if it doesn't adjust the nominal rate, then the real rate adjusts through inflation. And that is happening now. And I think the Chinese are very well aware of the risks that they're running, because you can't sterilize interventions on this scale indefinitely. So I think we're going to see a shift. And my suspicion is it won't be this year. I think it will come after the change of leadership next year. And it may well be that we'll be talking about a new Chinese currency regime 12 months from now.
Thank you very much.
Just add
go ahead.
And it's not going to become a flexible currency immediately. I think there'll be, as there has been in the past, periods of allowing a gradual appreciation of the renminbi, some percent a year, 6, 7 maybe, percent a year for quite some time until the imbalances readjust. Everybody's saying this can't go on forever. It's gone on for a very long time, and the testimony to that is it's gone on for nearly $3 trillion worth, which is way larger than anybody would ever have said you could expect to be accumulated in this program. It's gone far further than any of us would have said 10 years ago.
And it's historically unprecedented, because under the Bretton Woods system, neither West Germany nor Japan engaged in this kind of systematic reserve accumulation. Their currencies were periodically revalued, and that's one reason we look back quite nostalgically on Bretton Woods. I must say, listening to this conversation, I've become more and more convinced that something more needs to be done to move in the direction of a consensual realignment of currencies than just another G20 meeting, which I doubt very much is the right forum to produce that outcome. Bretton Woods might well be something we need to look back at. Sometimes people mistakenly said that they'd reinvented Bretton Woods in the last decade, but I think that turns out to have been a false analogy. What we may well need soon, if it doesn't come spontaneously from Beijing, is the kind of thing that happened after World War II and then happened periodically in the 70s and 80s, realignments of currencies on the basis of negotiation rather than of market forces, which often overshoot and undershoot, as we all know.
Brian, do you want to...
I think that there was a hegemon after World War II and in the 1970s, and this is an issue about whether there are two hegemons now, and it's much more difficult to redesign a system in that case.
Mr. Şimşek?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately, if China is going to sustain this regime, I don't know how they will be able to do that, considering the imbalances that it is causing it. So some sort of adjustment is probably, I agree, is inevitable, but the pace of it really is what we're discussing here. There has been some adjustment in the Chinese trade balance. Trade surplus has come down as a percent of GDP. Current account surplus has come down compared to pre-crisis level or compared to a few years ago. But I think the pace of it is very slow, and so that's really the question that we have right now, because many emerging markets in that region are competing for the same markets on similar products. And I think the Chinese policy is certainly not helping in terms of distorting It is a competitive undervaluation rather than devaluation here we're talking about.
Mark Carney, you had something to say.
I always have something to say, but no, I think it's interesting, Neil's point, in that we have a hybrid system. We have both a fixed and floating system, floating between the advanced economy currencies and quasi-fixed for a broad range of emerging market currencies because of largely the China dynamic. And so the question becomes, how is that adjustment, that real adjustment, going to come? Could you see, as a transition, the type of scenario that Neil just painted for the quasi-fixed? It's possible. I think that's part of the discussion that needs to be had in terms of, as China becomes an economic hegemon, a joint economic hegemon with the United States, what is its role and how is it transitioning in this role, and what are its responsibilities as well as its receipts?
Thank you so much. We're actually out of time at the moment, so I want to thank all of our panelists for taking part in this discussion, also the floor. And, well, if you want to see this debate again, Bloomberg will be airing it throughout the weekend, so check your local listings for that. And certainly what this debate has taught us is that we're nowhere really near a consensus on where currencies should go and revaluation and whether we need some kind of reserve currency to replace the dollar. Thank you so much, and have a great forum, everyone.